Welcome to the show, everybody. I want to remind you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's Film Talk Radio on YouTube. Today, I have with me a very special guest. This is Andrew Pollack. His short film Border Lord won Best New Mexico Short at the Santa Fe International Film Fest last October. Congrats on that, Andrew. Hey, how are you?
Hey, thanks. I'm good, Jack. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I've really been looking forward to recording this, and uh, we'll do like kind of an expose. So why don't we just start with you, where you come from, where did you grow up, all of that early. What's your origin story, as my frequent guest host Castle Searcy would say?
Yeah, I've had a little bit of an interesting journey that's brought me to New Mexico. I grew up in North Jersey, right outside of New York City. And then eventually found myself wanting to move west. So I moved to Austin, was there from about 2014 to 2018, doing some commercial work and some narrative projects. And then eventually had the pleasure to study at the American Film Institute out in Los Angeles. So was there, and then the pandemic happened. So in 2020, I sort of pivoted from Los Angeles, was looking to shoot Borderlord actually. So Borderlord was incepted probably about 2019. Was hoping to maybe do it as my thesis film. Didn't work out for various production reasons that aren't worth getting into. And then yeah, I was kicking around in New Jersey for a little bit, and then ironically, a couple of collaborators, my composer and a couple producers reached out and were wondering if we could still do Borderlord. So, with the incentives of New Mexico, and I spent some time out there when I was living in Texas. I came here in 2021 and shot Borderlord in 2022, and happily have not left. So that's what's brought me here.
Excellent. So you you live in Santa Fe?
I'm in Tesuque actually, so just right outside of Santa Fe. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And so I think that's an interesting story where you're at the American Film Institute, you're honing your craft, but then there's a global pandemic and you start to kind of re-envision what your career may be, what your life may be, move to a different city. What was going on with you at that time? What was that a reinventing of yourself too, or just mostly career wise?
I don't know if it was necessarily a full reinvention of myself. I think what I found at AFI, you shoot about 5 films if you're ambitious enough in your first year. And I kept finding myself shooting tons of projects that were either adaptations of short stories of I don't know if you know Pickney Benedict. I adapted one of his short stories called Town Smokes, or I did a Flannery Connor adaptation. Did a dark comedy that was set in Texas. So I just kept finding myself doing everything except making films that were set in sort of Los Angeles. So I think deep down just wasn't a place that at least at that point resonated with me and felt like a good place for me. We'll say spiritually as a filmmaker. And so I ended up, when the pandemic happened and, the whole film business shut down and still, has been slowly picking itself back up and then falling back and doing everything like that. New Mexico just seemed like a really great place from the outside. You saw these big productions coming in here, but to me, I think what I was very interested in with was actually the Western genre, not in its old archetypal structure. I mean, I love Ford and Anthony Mann and filmmakers like that. I mean, I think obviously they're incredible, Sam Peckinpah. But when you looked at the modern landscape of the Western, it was just like, what's the West today? I mean, a perfect example of, I think when you really look into the Western outside of, cowboys and Indians and bounty hunter films and things like that, it's the infringement of the frontier, and this sort of self-reliant lifestyle that was so ingrained in the American West. And then things like, again, Once Upon a Time in the West with the railroad coming in. The whole movie is the town fighting this railroad, bringing modernity and industrialization and things like that. And I think that is really layered in a lot of the really deeper Westerns, along obviously with sort of the disillusionment after the Civil War. That's obviously another big theme that's prevalent throughout these films. But when again, outside of Taylor Sheridan, it just felt like that genre's been just consistently regurgitated. We keep seeing movies that are just kind of going through the motions versus looking at what is the American West. And I think a movie like Hell or High Water obviously was pretty successful dealing with actually now the railroad leaving town. And Borderlord was shot in Tucumcari, and I very specifically picked an area like that. Although, it's a short film, so I'm not sure how much of that actually gets layered in. But you go to Tucumcari, you look at the photos of Tucumcari in even the 50s, and it's a thriving little city here in New Mexico. And you go today, and outside of the new recreational legalization of marijuana, there's no businesses there except for hotels that people are stopping in if you're coming from Amarillo or Dallas and you're making your way to either Santa Fe or Phoenix. And yeah, it's because all of this industry is left. And yet so much of the fabric of the West, ranching and sort of having that lifestyle that maybe isn't so capitalistically driven. Like, when you go look at a place like Austin now where I was living, and it's just filled with tech, which obviously there's nothing wrong with it. But I think, there should be other ways that if you want to express your life and live your life, and you want to, I think one of the cooler things is while I was shooting in Tucumcari, I sort of made a trade for trade deal. I fixed up his house while um this man, Ronnie Knapp, who's like a Vietnam vet, he's been in Tucumcari for 3 generations. And he said to me, I asked him, what is it you like so much about ranching? And he said, because I get to work with my family and I get to have my grandkids on the farm with us and my sons, and I have just what I need. And I thought that was a beautiful sentiment, and a beautiful message. And whether you're into it or not, that's not really the point. But I think, that sort of lifestyle is dying. And so what does that look like? Or, so to circle back to the Western, which obviously what Hell or High Water, Sheridan is touching on is, these people who have their land and their lifestyle, but there's not really any industry out there. So people are, forced to leave. And that's why we have all these ghost towns all over Texas and New Mexico and, Arizona. And yeah, so that was, I think, a a huge portion of it. There's a little bit of, I said, like, I mean, again, Borderlord, it's only 16 minutes, so you only can do so much. But I think that's something that I've been interested in exploring, and because I'm not from here, and for the past about 3.5 years, have really been slowly just learning from experience and just being around. And I've lived in a couple different places in the state. Um, you know, what that is. I think one day I would love to tackle a film that's really maybe using some syntax from the Western, but also looking at it in a way that I think resonates with much more of a contemporary feel of what, all these places are today. So,
I think that's an exciting place to find yourself in the lexicon of movies. Taylor Sheridan, who you brought up, has, really reinvented what it is on TV. I mean, there hasn't been a Western on TV that popular in recent memory. I think it even woke Kevin Costner up somehow. It was so popular.
yeah, right.
So, uh, the success of Borderlord winning Best New Mexico Short at the Santa Fe International Film Festival. Tell me about that. That must have been exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it was great. I've known about the Santa Fe International Film Festival for probably about 10 years now, always known to be a very reputable festival within certainly the Southwest. But just in regards to, I think the actual quality of films, bringing in some excellent foreign films, and yeah, just being able to get into the community here, was really exciting. And it's sort of, I think, spurred our festival run. We were playing in San Antonio this weekend. I won't be in attendance. We're playing in El Paso, Albuquerque, Film and Music. So we've had a pretty good Southwest run and a couple other places around the country. But yeah, it was really great to get into the community here and just start of, not just being on the fringes, but starting to just you know, meet some people. I worked on Dark Winds 2. I was assisting the showrunners on the second season and getting to meet and spend time with guys like Chris Eyre, and all of that has been a really great experience and growth for sort of a smaller film market that's booming at the moment. From my perspective, yeah, it seemed to have played really well. I've had a lot of people come over after, and seem genuinely were really moved by it.
Andrew, did you receive a lot of good feedback from friends and family on the award? And has it opened up any opportunities for you since taking Best New Mexico Short?
Yeah, I think I always am someone who tries to push for growth. So, even if somebody, is excited and says positive feedback, I'm curious and, you know, where where the shortcomings and missights are. Because I certainly see it, to be honest, in our work. I think that's the beauty of short films. I think this might be my 10th short film I've made in my life at this point. So I feel like, and it hopefully will be my last for a little bit as I'm working on sort of my feature film and wrapping that up. That'll be set here in New Mexico. I think, as I mentioned earlier, yeah, it definitely helped me get into some film festivals and within a little bit more of the local scene here and people, seeing um, some of my work. And then, yeah, it also did help me with some representation. Got a bunch of law companies reached out to me. So I have some really great legal representation out in Los Angeles and some management. Unfortunately, I think a lot of young filmmakers who are what we're struggling with right now because of the landscape of film and it being rather erratic with between the strikes and everything else. A lot of indie films seem to be it's a little bit hard to get started, and that also works on a sort of a representation way. A lot of management, you might get a general meeting, but I can't bring any new clients on because I don't know what the landscape's going to be in 3 months, which is respectable, right? You don't want somebody to just sign on and take a percentage and help you get work, but they can't get you any work because they can't get writers' rooms are closed and things like that. And so, yeah, so it's been, I think anybody, again, sort of in, we'll say, the early stages and trying to get into, their feet fully planted in the film business right now, it's a little bit uncertain. And that's just where it is. I think soon things hopefully should iron themselves out and we'll get back into, probably when these streaming platforms start figuring out their distribution and their payouts and just there's a little bit more of a consistency of production. I know here in New Mexico, obviously, when we work with a little bit of a different tier, there seems to be a ton of work, which is really really fun. And but again, that indie, we'll say tier $1 to $5 million budget kind of thing is just still a little lethargic at right now. So yes, for sure, but again, the landscape is what it is at the moment, and we're all trying to navigate through it.
And so, do you have a script for your next project? Are you putting together a treatment? What's next on the horizon for you as a movie maker?
Yeah, I'm almost finished up with a feature, which as of now, the working title is called No Glory in the West. Working with a co-writer out in Los Angeles. His name is Barrett Baumgart. More of a nonfiction, actually, novelist than he is a screenwriter. Um, but a really great mind, and we're both collaborating on this film that's set in 1683 here in New Mexico. And I sort of would coin it as a religious horror Western, sort of right after the revolt takes place and the Spanish have been pushed out and disillusioned about sort of, what they're doing up here in El Norte in the north after, Cortez and that whole period that happened about I think 100, years prior in Mexico. And there's this small outpost that's still in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, but and there's this padre who's converting a lot of natives, but nobody's ever heard of him. And so, in sort of a colonialist or imperialist way, the archbishop and the governor sort of set up this little 10-person mission, sort of has like Apocalypse Now sort of vibes or Gary the Wrath of God, very small, to go remove this heretical padre with one of their own pupils. Of course, that is not quite what the film entails. That's just the setup, and then things get a little bit erratic. And yeah, so it's a bit of a wild, small film. I'm not sure if I'll be able to. I'm hoping to shoot it in black and white and kind of give it that really nice old texture and use a lot of historical sites here in New Mexico if I can. And yeah, so it'll be a bit of a wild one, but yeah, been working on it, as I said, I think for the past year and a half or so.
Yeah, and are you accepting executive producers at this point? Are you is there going to be a way that somebody listening to the show who wanted to support the project could support it?
Absolutely. I mean, I certainly have a treatment at this time, and a lookbook and things that are a little bit more, we'll say, conducive to, you know, prospective investors or people. I do have a couple of people who are already interested on the producing side. Probably would take another month or two on the script before I would send it out to anybody, just because, fine tuning some of the details. But yeah, absolutely. Definitely looking for local New Mexico producers and people who, are ingrained with the fabric of the state and its history. Um, I think that's an important part of filmmaking, is surrounding yourself with people with different perspectives and different knowledge, and people who can, bring new light to what one's doing. So absolutely.
And how can they get in touch with you?
I mean, my email is a good way, always, which I'm sure if there was some way they either reached out through you, I mean, and or a phone number. I mean, that was probably the easiest. I'm sort of
Yeah, I don't think you want to say your phone number on the air, but is there like a website or an Instagram?
No, yes, I don't think I was going to give away my phone number. I actually don't. I don't really have any social media. I sort of stay off of it, as odd as that is for a modern millennial of my age. I keep myself, just a little
Yeah, I
bit
wasn't
distant.
sure if you were a millennial or a Zoomer, but tell me about the staying off of social media.
Y it's just a choice, I think, in the world today. I mean, I just like to keep sort of. I don't find it to be the healthiest thing to be involved in. I think there's a lot of, sort of what we'll call subconscious competition, and you only have so much time free a day. And, I find myself, if you're on social media and things like that, you'll waste an hour and a half probably throughout the day just scrolling and things like that. It is a useful tool for networking, 100%, but I don't know. I like to, kind of stay away from that stuff. I just find it to be a little bit healthier personally for me in terms of how I navigate my day to day, and just a healthier way, probably psychologically, to, I don't know, just kind of stay, connect with the people you do. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's a sort of a choice. I've made it. I'm 32 now. I've made it this far without using Instagram since it's been open. So I don't seem to have such a strong passion or desire to do it. I think if I was a cinematographer and like my work is solely visual, then I would probably do that, because I think it's a helpful way for work. But directing, I think, there's so much to it. There's so much more in regards to, character and disposition, that, people always say it's good for work, but I'm looking for people who want to work with me on a little bit of a deeper level, not seeing just a couple of nice frames from a film and all that. So yeah, that's sort of my approach to Instagram and all that.
So, how do you keep up with what your friends from high school are having for lunch?
I call them. I give them a call.
Now, yeah, I've heard that different actors, are told to get off of social media because they're kind of giving away what their product is. And so maybe it's the same for you. Now, when you're promoting a film, I think a lot of it is kind of wrapped up into Instagram nowadays. What are your thoughts there? I mean, when I see a movie trailer, sometimes it's on TV, but it's also often just there's a new movie, there's a new trailer for it, and it's on Instagram.
Sure. I think at that level, like if we're talking about once, you shoot a feature, I imagine I have some sort of PR team and marketing that's their job. I mean, I would hope my producers would be taking care of that a little bit more. And in that sense, that I have no problem with because, I think in general that stuff, with press kits in general, you need to have that stuff ready and Instagram's a really great tool for that. My own personal account, that's where I feel, but yeah, no, I would imagine um, as I said, we hire people who are better at what they do than myself. And so I would hope that we would bring on somebody who would be savvy in that regard and say, hey, this is what we need to do. Hey, we need to do this little blurb or BTS or whatever that would be. And yeah, use that, on social media. That's where social media can absolutely be such a powerful uh, medium or platform rather for all this stuff.
Andrew, tell me a little bit about your style, your craft, who you are as a movie maker.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's always an interesting question when somebody asks, you know, what kind of films do you like to make? Where are your inspirations? I have, of course, like many filmmakers, just a plethora of people and artists that you're pulling from. For this film, myself and my cinematographer, Moritz Rautenberg, who's actually based in Berlin at the moment, we used a lot of photography, which was something that I've slowly been actually doing a little bit more of than looking at motion pictures for inspiration. I think, photography, when done well, is such an incredible medium because you have one image that is a story. Sometimes if it's more um, like journalistic, that's a question. But then there's some photographers. My cinematographer and I are big fans of Helmut Newton. I wouldn't say Helmut made his way into this film at all, but when you look at something that is obviously very stylized, very composed, very controlled, like Helmut, a lot of his stuff has really amazing storytelling. Like why this character at this exact frame, like a foot up versus a foot down, a door half open versus closed. And what does that say for storytelling? For this film, what's been kind of fun, I think photographically, we really leaned into Stephen Shore. I don't know if who's familiar with Stephen Lissing. Stephen was a really interesting photographer that was famous for bringing Kodachrome, to a little bit more of a natural landscape. Kodachrome was being used for like portraiture or commercial work because of its color palette and saturation. And Stephen did this a couple of really great books that were about him traveling the West. There's actually even some that were in Tucumcari, New Mexico, which we got a trip out of when looking through it. And I think we just really liked his textures and tones. I think there was sort of a timelessness that we liked about it that I think even in my color grade with this, um, that we were really excited about. Worked with our colorist, Alistair Arnold, who's doing really well. He actually just colored Sean Baker's film Nora that just won the Palme d'Or. So congrats, Al, to that. And but yeah, I think what we really do put a lot of time and energy into our visual style, because I think there's an interesting conversation with digital and film. I'm a huge fan of celluloid. Would love to have shot this, of course, on celluloid. Have done a little bit of work on 35 motion, and it's just such a hard thing to go to a producer and say, yeah, let's add a sixth of our budget to shoot on that. I do think it definitely changes performance. I think it's the way that filmmaking is being looked at, and I think it is a little bit sad in a modern lens seeing a lot of filmmaking in terms of we'll call it intention to me as a filmmaker is I keep trying to another filmmaker who I'm very influenced by is Edward Yang, the Taiwanese filmmaker. Talk about objective filmmaking, fixed frames, long takes. Um, his films are feel so intentional, yet there isn't so much sophistication. Or you look at, of course, another influences like Martin Scorsese and Paul Thomas Anderson, American cinema, and these guys all grew up working with film. Jeff Nichols, but was it, his earlier work with Michael Shannon, like Shotgun Stories and Take Shelter. And when you can't just roll the camera constantly, I think it really teaches you a lot more about, what are we trying to say subtextually? Where are we putting the camera? And I think, a lot of younger filmmakers that at least I see. We're losing that intentionality. And I think that, that use of staging and, I was just rewatching a Mizoguchi film from the 40s, and you look at the way he moves the camera very slowly, and again how the characters are stacked in certain frames, and it there's a subconscious to it that I think from an audience member, I think you feel like you're in good hands. I think I talk about this a lot with some of my fellow young filmmakers of like, I think within the first minute of a film, whether you're in good hands or not. Whether you like the film or not, it's a different conversation. But again, it's that intentionality. Are we really thinking about why we're putting a camera here? Why are we using this focal length? And I think that's such a huge part of filmmaking. That's really what makes cinema in such a way. I mean, there's so many different elements, of course, within design that we can talk about, but it is the relationship of the audience and how us as directors and storytellers are lensing it, and where we're specifically putting it and why. And I think that's such an interesting thing. And when you shoot, of course, digital is amazing in many ways. But when you really have to say, all right, I only have 5 takes and I could have 2 setups because that's what we can just afford. And you can still tell an incredible story. It just might make you have to really think about the why, and again, the subtext. So those are things that I certainly continue to grow, and I try to push myself to do so. Especially as I know if I'm trying to shoot a film that's, out in the wilderness in the elements, that I'm not going to have such a controlled environment. So, and I think it's a really important thing for young filmmakers to think about. We talked a lot about it at AFI within our teachers, who are all established directors who've been doing it from a long time, from TV or narrative work. Of when you're going into your first film, you have to know that there's going to maybe be like 4 or 5 scenes that you really can take your time on. The rest are going to be just due to budget constraints or whatever it is. You're going to have to move really quickly, and you have to learn how to work with it. I think there was a really great interview with Lyle Corbin from Wild Indian, who was talking about how he spent 5 years on this script or something like that, through the Sundance labs and all that stuff. And here he was on set, and his AD comes up to him and says, "You have 30 minutes to shoot this scene." And you're just sitting there and being like, okay, and you have to be prepared for that. So I think all of this stuff um, sort of translates and prepares you for, when you can get there. I mean, in the total opposite side of that, which is, amazing filmmakers. I'm, of course, huge fans of the Coen brothers as well. Some of my other work that isn't probably quite evident in Borderlord, I do like to work in dark comedy. Um, I was talking to a local actor, Luce Rains, here in Santa Fe. He's friends with one of my good friends here, so we were out to dinner, and we were talking about he's in No Country for Old Men. He's in that great shootout scene that they shot in Las Vegas. And he was saying how great it was because I think he was there for almost 2 weeks for that scene, because they just, and they have that time and they have the money. And so it's almost like, it's such an interesting thing to look at, we all are making the same, yeah, we're all in the same medium, but yet at the same time, we're also doing something so much different. Like Rodrigo Prieto came to AFI to talk about The Irishman and how him and Scorsese were matching period sets to. It's crazy. I mean, it's brilliant, and he's such a brilliant mind, and they're such brilliant filmmakers. But you're like, oh, I thought I was making movies, but not even close to the same level as these guys. So I think those are all sort of conversations and things that just, what sets us up to be successful and to find integrity and intentionality with what we're doing with our limited, resources. But I think that's all part of the fun.
You brought up the first frame of a movie, and in Borderlord, we see you really show that you know the importance of that. Talk to me a little bit more about that first frame or the opening of a.
Yeah, I think the opening shot of Borderlord is again this long take of a train that's going across the wilderness. I can get into the whole story about actually getting that shot, which was a lot of fun because after 9/11, the United States stopped releasing their train schedules. So you have no idea when a train is running. So we had to pray to the movie gods a little bit that we would hopefully be able to find a shot and hopefully have it in the right time of day, that it's not a flat, just over top lit shot of a train. And so we shot that about, I don't know, 30 miles outside of Tucumcari. in between, we'll say Santa Rosa and Tucumcari off the side of the road. And, like a guerrilla fashion, I took my truck and went just sort of along the road, and we snuck into some property and we tucked ourselves in, and it was like 98 degrees at least when we're sitting there and we're sweating. And then suddenly we hear the sound of a train, got the camera out and got the shot. And that was a pretty exciting. That was one of the few times where you shoot a movie and you're like, wow, we got really lucky today. This really worked out. But that's more of a production story in terms of like my intentions behind the shot. I mean, so the film deals with sort of a border crosser, but again, a lot of the film doesn't really focus on his story. I didn't think that was really quite my story that I needed to tell. I mean, there's been a lot of really excellent films that have been through the lens of, immigrants trying to cross in to the film, but rather from the perspective of the American side of it and sort of what you would do. So I think the opening shot is a little bit away, probably not necessarily on a first viewing, but if you revisit the film, of thinking about this character's journey and how did he get there and what was the method. Some of it is to just put a little bit of some thoughts into the audience's mind.
Andrew, where can people see Borderlord next? I know you brought up a couple Texas film festivals it's playing, and what are some upcoming chances for people to see the movie?
Yeah, locally there's a couple of different spots where you can check it out. Since it's still on the festival circuit, there's no current distribution that we've actually put the film on in terms of like a streaming platform. But soon I think, we're in a couple of talks with some people to do so. But if you're local here in New Mexico, at the end of September, we'll be playing on Saturday. I think it's September 28th, but whatever that last Saturday is in September, or the opening slot at the Albuquerque Film and Music Experience for New Mexico Shorts. And then also in that same weekend, we are playing in El Paso at the El Paso Film Festival. I'm not sure quite yet. They haven't released the schedule, but we're pretty excited about that. They were just coined as one of the top 50 film festivals in the US by Movie Maker magazine. So I've never been there, but El Paso has been a part of this film from the beginning. Um, we actually,
It's a cool city. I mean, it's much bigger than I imagined. You know what I mean? It's like nearly the size of Denver, and I think I always kind of saw it as more of a small town, but it's becoming more of a big city, and then it's got kind of a lot of stuff going on with commerce and um, good restaurants. I had a really good time when I was down there.
yeah, I love El Paso. I really do. I'm really excited to screen there. And then one of one of our actors has a pretty good footing in Manny Rubio in El Paso too. So yeah, really grateful. I'm hoping as long as he's not working, he'll be there too. And that's always really nice. So yeah, those will be two upcoming screenings. And then this weekend, I think as I mentioned, we're screening at the San Antonio Film Festival. Um, so yeah, those are some up and coming uh places that you'll be able to see it if you want to see it in person. And yeah, we're really excited about that at the end of our run to play locally. You know,
Yeah, and it's playing in San Antonio too.
yeah. So it's this weekend, I believe it's playing at the San Antonio International Film Festival.
So tell me a little bit about your experience since the movie came out, because I know it's your 10th short film, but I know this one was quite an ordeal to complete. And so since this film is getting out there in the world, how are people reacting to it? What's going on in your life?
I mean, overall, it's been a ride, like every film, as you mentioned. Yeah, I think we took almost 3 years to get this film in the can. I mean, so many bumps in the road. Like our producers were driving out, my creative partner, we went to AFI together, Jordan Wilcox. Been coming back and forth to do the film for a while, and him and another producer were driving in from LA, and they were renting a picture car And on the way, a monsoon happens. The picture car spins out on the road. They get into a terrible accident. Luckily, nobody was hurt, but the car wasn't in good shape. So, all sorts of those crazy stories. And they show up 3 hours before we're starting production, and we made it work. So, and there's so many stories like that, as we know within movie making. But since the film has been out, it's generally been a pretty positively received film, at least from my point of view. Um, I'd say it's a slightly difficult film to program at certain places just because, we've gotten a lot of personal, rejections from certain places saying, "Hey, we love the film, we're really excited to see what you do next, but we just have a hard time finding it again because, as I mentioned, within, where do you put this film in a short film program? Is it a Western? Is it a drama? Is it a family drama?" And that's okay because I think that's sort of much more exciting to me as a filmmaker to not being able to be, we'll say, pigeonholed or quite easily described. But yeah, no, it's always been exciting. I think we made this film to see it with audiences. I think there's an interesting conversation that if you watch it, that comes forth. So I think all that has been really exciting. I think when you think about film, especially a short film, to have people be able to, come after a Q&A and really seem to have connected and had some emotional connection, you're doing your job pretty well. Because I mean, that's what does it to me in a lot of ways with movies is it's such a beautiful form because you can sit in this dark, quiet room and you can have some filmmaker not only transport you to a different world and show you different perspectives, but move you, I mean, many elements times in our life, if we're crying, it's not something that just generally washes away. We're dealing with grief. We're dealing with some other, whatever it is that brings us to that place. But a movie that can make you cry, it's beautiful. It's how we feel alive, and it gives us, our emotions are so strong as humans. So I think that's anytime you can, I don't think necessarily I'm bringing people to tears, so to speak, with this film, but just that general idea of the power of cinema or storytelling in general. I mean, music can do it and art can do it in many different ways, but since we're talking about this medium here, it's been really, really exciting to see people respond and engage. So overall, I'm very grateful for that.
And you talked about the power of movies to evoke an emotional response. I think you're really getting to the heart of connecting with an audience there. And you're a relatively young guy, but you have a lot to say. Um, Over the past several years, what was it like convincing people that you had something to say, that you've got stories to tell?
That's a good question. I don't know. It's something that, I think I was reading an interview with Alex Ross Perry the other day, and New York filmmaker, pretty independent, and he was talking about, after I think this was maybe an interview from like 2016 or so, so it was a little bit before he did like Hit Her Smell and a little bit of some of maybe we'll call slightly for Alex Ross Perry standards bigger budget films. But he was talking about, why make a film and go to sort of war for 3 years on a project if there isn't something exciting and passionate about it. And I think, I mean, of course, he I think gets some pretty good income on the side from his screenwriting. But I think overall, the point that he's making, that I think any young filmmaker should be asking, is like the why am I doing this? And Borderlord was one of the first shorts that I really felt there was a reason behind it and something I wanted to really explore outside of just like I would like to make a movie and continue to stay, sharp with the craft and, just being on set and working through it. And so that's also the same thing with the feature I mentioned, No Glory in the West. I been trying to search for a couple of years now, more internally of, right, what film do I want to make and what do I really want to say and how do I want to position myself as a storyteller? And and yeah, so I think all that stuff is really the key is finding whoever you are, whatever, medium you work in, if, we have the luxury to do so, which we all know sometimes is a little bit harder to do. But, I mean, film is such a process from writing it to financing it. So I think with and to shooting it, and obviously the whole post process and festivals and everything, it's really about 3 to 4 years of your life, most likely. And so I think with Borderlord, I had an intention and reasons behind it, and there were things that were personally resonant with me. That I think when people, saw the lookbook and listened to me talk about it, they connected. So that was, of course, many instances where you have false starts and people who aren't interested in that. And I think that's great too. I think also making art that is not, I truly believe if you're making a film that if you're in an audience of 100 people and everybody loves the film for the most part, there's maybe something a little bit too safe about it. Like I see behind you, you have Oppenheimer. I loved Oppenheimer. I thought it was a really mature, exciting piece for Nolan. I mean, Nolan's an incredible filmmaker, but to see him tackle a film like that was exciting. But I have so many conversations with people who were bored by it and they didn't like it. And I think that's great, and maybe didn't like his choice of going black and white and color and all of the artistic, sensibilities that he put into it. And that's okay. I'm sure Chris is pretty happy with how Oppenheimer came out. So yeah, so I think that's sort of a little bit of a philosophy in general of art, and how I try to approach it the best I can.
Andrew, thanks so much for joining us. Everybody, this was the winner of Best New Mexico Short at the Santa Fe International Film Fest last October. This is Andrew Pollack. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. It was a lot of fun.